Okay, here we go. With starting economy. Now you know all you need to know about hardware and biology and that kind of stuff. So now where do you go from there? Okay, we're going to start with different methods. This is like catching a swarm. That's a nuke box, and that's a package of bees. That's the three main ways of getting bees if you got the money to start with. Okay, earlier we discussed biology and equipment. We didn't discuss apiary location. We got switched. That's going to come next. Now we're going to talk about how to start. Your starting point will vary on how you acquire your bees. That's a good example of a double deep with a couple of supers on top. First lesson in beekeeping though, before you get your bees, you got to learn to use a smoker. If you don't believe that, try using working bees without using a smoker. Two theories behind smoke is important and helps. One, she talked about it obscures the alarm pheromone. Okay, that way if you do piss them off, they start to release that pheromone, or if one stings you, that masks it so the other bees don't know that there's a problem. The second is, where did bees live before we built these nice boxes for them? In forests, in woods, in trees. What happens when there's a lightning strike? Fire. Fire, bees evolved to associate smoke with the house burning down. So what they'll do is they'll go back into the hive, fill up their honey stomach with honey, so if their hive burns down, they can leave and start with resources to start a new hive. So what happens when they fill up their honey stomachs?
Slow down.
They slow down. They get lethargic, just like you after Thanksgiving dinner. Okay, they get sleepy or lethargic, and they also get weighted down, like you said, with water. They don't fly as much, so they tend to get lethargic, and they won't be as active around the hive. So it obscures the alarm pheromone, and it makes them go back down inside the hive and not worry about you so much. Finding a smoker. She talked about it. We've got the different times, different types. Lots of kind of fuel. Pine cones, pine needles, cardboard wood, just about anything you want. And you can go pay a lot of money for packages of dryer, of lint, or yarn, or burlap, and that kind of stuff. But if you got a yard full of leaves, or you got a couple of pine trees with pine cones and pine needles, that's just as good as anything. You can use newspaper to start them inside. That'll burn up pretty quick. Paper does. Organic materials probably lasts longer in your smoker. If you've got wood chips, that tends to, once they get going, they do pretty good. The pellets, like the Traeger pellets for grills and stuff, those are okay, but it takes them a lot longer to get going. So unless you've got a lot of hives to do, by the time you're done doing your hives, then your smoker's ready. So I wouldn't recommend that. Ignition source, you can use matches, big lighters, stick lighters. Me personally, I got tired of buying big lighters, so I got me a propane torch to go in a little green bottle. I just took that thing off at about 2,000 degrees, and my smoker lit pretty quick. Bee suit, she's covered a lot of the stuff about the jackets. Like I said, you can get full-length suits, you can get just jackets, you can get colors if you want, you can get kids' bee suits. I wouldn't put a kid out there with one like that without a veil on it. I think that's in there.
That looks like Halloween.
High top boots or rubber boots, especially if you're working in a marshy or you got a bad soil or something like that. I wouldn't recommend this approach to personal protective equipment. Just saying. Gloves, she talked about gloves. I won't go into that anymore. The bottom line is protective clothing. Don't buy online unless you can get a full refund. Go to a place where you can try on the suit, try on the gloves, try on the different veils, because you've got the space helmet type, you've got the broad rim type, you've got the safari hat type with the square veil. Try those on and figure out what you think feels best for you. Also, you go in a suit that fits loose enough to go over your outer clothes. Okay? Ventilated suits are great for the hot summer. Okay? The solid cotton are good for winter because they're warmer. You will burn up in a solid cotton suit in the middle of summer. So go to go to TBS, go to Dayton's over in Paris. It's just about a 45-minute to an hour drive over there. Try on the equipment to make sure, because if you get core fitting equipment, the bees will tell you about it. Dadant, D-A-D-A-N-T. They're a national supplier. They just happen to have a local office right over there in Paris, Texas. If you want to go to a Man Lake, a true Man Lake store, they've got one in Marshall. That's a little further drive east, but you can go there too. The equipment TBS carries is Man Lake equipment. Okay, starting with a swarm or a package of bees. A swarm and a package are about the same way as far as how you start. If you're starting with a swarm and a package, is nothing but bees. There's no frames, there's no honey, there's no resources. It's just bees and a queen. Okay? You can use the same process if you're starting from either one. The goal was to get the bees from the bush, or the tree, or the package box. You didn't show one up, but that's a package of bees. No frames, no comb, or nothing in there. Just a can of sugar water for them to feed on, a queen in a cage, and bees. So the goal is just to get all of them in your box. Now, starting with a swarm. First, you got to be prepared. Either one, you got to have a box. You got to have a box. You got to have some empty frames. If you can find a beekeeper that has some frames built out with comb, beg, borrow, or steal a frame or two of built-out comb. You will save yourselves a couple of weeks getting your hive started because they won't have to build out comb. They've already got some to build out so she can start laying in. A single deep hive body with frames, a bottom board, inner cover, the basic equipment we already talked about. Sometimes a swarm is not worth getting. I've been called out to remove swarms, and you have 50 bees in a queen. That's not enough bees to be viable. I'll go ahead and collect them from the place so they don't have to have the customers worrying about getting stung. But I'll go and I'll combine those with a hive. I don't even try to save that as its own hive. There's just not enough bees to worry about. You've also got to worry about where you're getting them from. If you're trying to collect a swarm up in a tree, okay, the cost of a package of bees is far less than a trip to the hospital. Okay, so be smart about how you do it. An experienced beekeeper, you also may have little or no success getting a swarm to survive in a box. We'll talk some more about that later on. Swarms come from existing bee colonies. We'll talk more about this process later, I think, or maybe it's in this one. But the process, the whole purpose of a hive, a colony, is to reproduce in the spring, right before the nectar flow, so half of that hive can take off and go start a new colony. That's why they exist. That's the whole purpose. That's what they do. So that swarm you're catching is coming from an existing hive. It's got a queen, usually it's the old queen, and a large number of worker bees and drones. But again, no resources other than them they have some honey in their stomach. It varies in size. Like I said, I've seen swarms that are, barely a handful, and I've seen swarms that would fill up a nuke box, literally fill it up. And generally they're very docile. They're only hostile if they've got something to protect them, they feel threatened. You can go up to a swarm on a tree and just pick it up. You put your hands through there, and they'll just swarm all over your hands and won't sting you. They're not afraid of losing anything. They've got nothing to protect. There we go, swarm. They can occur any time of the year except in winter. Normally they'll occur in the spring when the hive starts to build up. But they will also swarm in late September. We've seen some of that too. Not often, but you'll see them anywhere. Fence posts, car bumpers, there's another fence row, hanging off a swing set on a bench. That is me actually catching my own swarm in my own yard up in a tree. And I was successful in keeping that one too. On branches, I can't tell what that last one is, but you'll see them just about anywhere. And once you get into business and people know you're a beekeeper, they'll see a swarm of bees and they'll call you and say, hey, I got some bees, come get them. When you start with a package, you've got basically the same thing. Nothing but bees and a queen. You get a 3-pound package in a box. It's got a syrup can, a queen in a cage, and bees. If it's shipped, it may have marshmallows or dry sugar instead of a liquid king, because they don't want that spilling out.
They won't allow you to ship liquid syrup in a box anymore. So this one over here had a can, but I went to Navasota and picked it up.
When you do get it, keep it in a cool place, dark place. You don't want it put it in your backseat of your car in August. Well, you're not gonna get it in August, but it'll get too hot, so it'll die in a heartbeat. You don't want it too cold either, because you don't want to get chilled. We'll talk a lot more about package of it sometime. Installing the package. The bees are clustered around the syrup. They're trying to get her to feed. The queen cage. You got a queen cage?
Yeah, it's inside the can.
Oh, okay. Oh, there it is. It's got a little metal tab on it here, and it's tucked in under. It's not actually. She's not loose with the bees, because this queen is not. These aren't her children. It's a separate queen. They just shook bees out of another hive and put a new queen in there, so they're not used to her. So they put her in a cage so they won't sting her to death until they get used to her smell. So she'll be in this little cage off to the side. So you'll have to worry about how to get that done. I think we talked about it.
And she's not getting fed either. So
They're feeding her.
Oh, they are.
She'll have attendants. Sometimes she'll have attendants in the cage. You know, some of the other bees will come in and feed her. There's also usually a piece of candy in one of them. So if she's got attendants, 2 or 3 attendants in there with her, they will eat the candy and come back and feed that to her inside the cage. They'll take care of it.
You'll see it, usually in a package, they won't put attendants, and they expect the other bees in there to start accepting her and feeding her through the screen. If you buy just a queen and have it shipped to you, she'll always have attendants in there because they'll have food in their honey stomachs, and you'll have the sugar, the candy one, and they will feed her. So in a package, there's usually never any attendance. And you know, if you buy a queen and you want her to be accepted easier, it's better to remove the attendants. But that's tricky, so a lot of times the suppliers will tell you not to because they don't want you to lose your queen due to being from. When you guys, you get a mentor, when you get a mentor, the mentor can usually help you come and help you with the installing package. Also, in that book you got, there's detailed instructions on how to do this, so you don't have to make all these notes and memorize it.
Well, it's in your slides and stuff, but I'm not going to read through all this. It's a spray them with trigger water that calms them down, keeps them from flying so much. You take them down into the box, and there's some other things you want to do. We'll get into that when we get into later on, actually installing and stuff. And then you put the queen down in there, and the technique to do that, we'll talk about it in another class too. And then they get used to her, and they'll eat the candy out, and they'll release her, and then you've got a queen. Okay, putting bees in the hive. When the queen cage is removed, you cover the hole with wood scrap to prevent the bees from eating in there. Queen cages are varied. You've got the wooden one I just showed you. You've got little plastic ones like that. I can't remember what that one's called.
They call these JVs.
JV, yeah. And that's got a piece of candy in this snout up here, and then attendants or no attendants, if you got them, are in here. And eventually they'll eat through that candy.
They usually have a fork covering the end of the candy that you have to remove. They leave the fork in there just in case the bees do that candy before you're ready to have it released. So you usually have to remove the cork so that they can't eat through the candy.
Sometimes there's corks in both ends. Make sure you remove the cork from the end of the candy, not the other end, because then it's out before they've had a chance to get these corks. Check the queen cage to make sure she's alive and well. Remove the cork or cap. Find the white candy. A plastic queen cage. It doesn't have 3 holes. It's just ventilated all around. It's called what do you say?
A JV. Usually a JV is what they call it.
Oh, okay. This one said they call it a Benton candy. There's different names for it.
The 3 holes.
Oh, the 3 holes. Okay.
This is what they call a Benton. It has
And then that gets
Basically, they
described.
took a piece of wood and they used a,
Router and drill hole.
what was it, those, Forster bits, drilled 3 flat holes, and then they drilled 2 holes on each side, and put some screen on there. So, this is an old tiny cage, so you'll see both, you know, four or a bunch of queens, a lot of times they'll have it this, and then they'll glue it on a piece of cardboard, and they put it in a box, and ship it to you.
This is a bigger picture of the one she's passing around and talking about candy in one end with cork, and cork in the other end, and then you'll have a queen and or bees in the middle there. Make sure she's alive, and we're still in the package. You place a queen excluder on the bottom of your box, because sometimes queens are let out, they don't like the home, so they want to try to leave. So the queen excluder on there to keep her in there. She can't go anywhere, she'll finally start laying, and then once she starts laying, then she's yours. So then you can take the queen excluder off.
You don't want to leave it on there long term, because drums cannot pass through the
Yeah,
queen
just
excluder.
till she starts getting used to it.
They put the queen in there in the little box.
Yeah, yeah.
Otherwise you'll.
Reckon how long that would be?
Usually you'll put it in there and then check back, and she should be released within 3 days. If she hasn't been released within 3 days, then they're either ignoring her or they're trying to attack the cage. That means that they're not accepting her. There could be reasons for that. You might have a queen in there, you didn't know you had a queen in there, or there might be a new virgin queen that hatched out that you didn't realize was there, and they're not accepting this queen. Sometimes they just decide they don't like a queen.
Yeah.
You know, we don't like her. You know,
Wrong
we're
with that.
Italians and she's a Russian, we can't speak her that same language or something. You know, every once in a while they'll reject a queen. But you can tell usually if they're going to accept her or reject her by the way they behave. If they're-
Around the box.
yeah, if they get on that cage and they're trying to sting through it, and you try to knock them off your finger, and they just, get back on there, they're not wanting to accept that queen. It's normal for them to get on the cage and go, hi, yeah.
In that case, you got a problem. Either gotta try to get another queen, or just give them more time, or spray them with sugar water or something to make them like her better. It's just, yeah. Always use an introducer on a swarm or a young, new installed hive like that, because they don't have enough bees. You don't want to give them robbers an opportunity, a big space for them to have to protect the guard. So always use an introducer as well as a queen excluder on the bottom until things get installed. That's that thing. This one here.
Oh, that's what that is.
Yeah. Introducer. You need to want to put it on that one so that there's less for them to have to guard, and then the queen excluder to keep the queen from leaving. Okay. Here she talks about that if they haven't eaten through it, you put a little pinhole in that sugar. And that gives them a little bit of, helps them eat through a little bit quicker. Remove the cork, put it in. Why don't you release her right away? Because they may not be used to her. And they will kill her if they don't recognize her in the light.
And they could be upset from being dumped into the box.
That's true, they'll be angry.
Yeah, a lot of times they'll get angry. I had a hive that I lost a really good queen in one time because I was swapping frames around, getting ready to put a double screen board on there to produce queen cells, and the bees got so angry because I caged the queen to make sure I knew exactly when I went to put her back in, they picked her up, carried her back in the hive, and killed her. Yeah. Oh, I was really upset about that. They killed her because they were so upset about the hive being disturbed that I guess they blamed her.
That lose the hive, you lose the hive over that?
Yeah, they were not very good at, they didn't do real well about starting these queen cells. And eventually that hive bale that I had I recleaned it with the new.
Now,
I combined it.
right, for installing the package of this in a hive, put a couple of blocks in the bottom so that you can turn this package, shake the bees out gently, then you put this down in there on top of the block so there's space between the hole and the bottom so they can continue to come out. You put this in the center with frames on each side. And then as they come out, they begin to start to populate up on the frames and begin to take up housekeeping. And then a day or two later, you come back and you can be able to take this out, put it in front of the hive, because there may still be a few bees in here that haven't decided to leave yet. And then they will come up into the hive for the queen. And then you replace, when you put this out of, put new frames in.
You don't want to leave it in there because they'll start building wax.
They'll build wax and comb it,
building
yeah.
nest. So you want to take it out as soon as possible. I usually take it out the next day.
If you don't want to do this, this is what happened here. They took the package out, but forgot to put frames in there, so guess what? They built the comb every which way. Make sure you feed your bees. They've got to build wax. Okay? And so the more sugar water you can feed them, the less resources they have to go get to come back to feed themselves. So feed them. Remember, remember about colony growth in the swarm or package. They've got no comb to build on unless you were able to, like I said, get some frames with comb built out of it already. So the population of bees in your new hive will decrease before it starts to increase because there's no new babies to be laid, no eggs to lay, they got no space. Those bees, you don't know how old those bees are when they got in here. They may have been 5 weeks old. So they're going to start dying on you. Why you need, if you got more comb to put in there, you'll speed things up. So it's going to decrease before they get enough space for her to lay and start to repopulate. That's why it's important.
How many days did I say it took for worker bees from being laid? 21 days. That's right, 21 days. So even if she starts laying when she's released from the cage almost immediately, which she won't if there's no place to lay, you know, it's going to take 21 days before you start having new bees. And usually they don't start laying 2,000 eggs a day. They start slow.
You may have bees that are already 3 to 5 weeks old, and here you're looking at the population.
That's right.
Yeah.
Here's your problem. Even if the queen starts laying, even if she's got wax to build lay in, it may take her a day or two to get used to the home. So it takes 5 or 6 days to start laying, 21 days to hatch before new brood emerges. That's at 26 days. Well, you're, like I said, you're halfway through your age of your bees, even if they were all brand new bees when you got them. And you know most of them weren't. So before the egg increases, you're going to have to start to get a critical point.
So what's the chances of finding these already populated frames like we're talking about?
In a club like this, easy. Okay? I've got frames that in all of my hives that are, especially over the winter like this, that they're empty. I run double leaks, and coming up this winter, or coming out of winter now, I've got probably a full box full of empty frames. They're all moved up into the top box with honey and stuff left, so I've got a bottom box full of frames with nothing on it. They're all brood frames. So it shouldn't be that hard if you're in a club like this. You'll find somebody that can do that. Even if you've got 1 or 2 to put in there, that gets you started. That's 4 or 5 days worth of leg laying immediately. So you're way ahead of the problem.
That's if you go with the package.
That's if a package. Yeah. Now we're going to go on to lids here in a minute. We talked about this, why you're behind the curve if you start with a package or a swarm. Not impossible. A lot of people do it anyway. We'll talk about the advantages and disadvantages real quick here. Here's the differences. A nuke or nucleus colony, she talked about it. You've got a standard 5 frame. It's already got a queen. It's got 2 frames of brood. Most of it's already capped, so you've got eggs coming out any day now, new bees. You've got a frame of feed with bees on it. You've got foundation, an empty comb, and enough bees to keep the brood warm. All positive things. A package or a swarm, 3-pound package is nothing but a cage queen, a can of some kind of food, and then tens of thousands, usually about 3,000 bees, between a 2 and a 4-pound package. Pros and cons, nukes are a better investment because it's an established colony, starts faster, grows faster. The bees have accepted that queen. You know she's already been laying in there. It's got drawn out comb, and it's more likely to get bees acclimated to your location. Cons, it's more expensive. Like we talked about the prices, it can be a lot more expensive than a package. But if you buy a package and don't die, it's pretty expensive. Availability can be an issue. Local beekeepers sell a limited number of nukes because to sell nukes, they have to take away from their colonies. And they want colonies to raise and make honey and that kind of stuff too. The pros for packages, cheaper, fairly easy to install. Availability typically doesn't fluctuate as much as it does with nukes. The cons, requires a lot of feeding and slow to build up. Questions to ask before you buy either one. For nukes, how many frames? Standard is 5 frames. Sometimes it's 4 frames with a feeder in it. Sometimes it's just a 3-frame nuke. So when you see the prices that vary from $150 to $350, ask them, how many frames is that? And how many frames of bees is that? And how many are empty frames and how much of it's feeder? Ask those kind of questions. How old is the queen? Is it this year's queen or last year's queen? Is it marked or clipped? Marked is something that's worth $5 to get a marked queen, so you can find it. Clipped, you can buy a clipped queen, which really is just a safeguard, so that if she doesn't like where you put her in the new home, she can't really fly away. The downside of getting a clipped queen is those bees may not take kindly to their queen being disfigured, and they may decide she's not worth it, and then eventually they kill her. So now you're out of queen. What's the major breed line, if they can tell you what that is? May not be a difference, and you may not have much of a choice, but especially if you say, I want all Russians, you got to go to a pure Russian certified breeder. A lot of folks are selling VSH line, Varroa sensitive hygienic. It's supposed to be better against Varroa. We just ask them what it is. What region do they come from? I don't want bees from Vermont. Okay, they probably couldn't take Texas heat. Probably wouldn't get nukes from there anyway. But just make sure where they're from. You may have a local supplier here.
They won't ship nukes.
They won't ship nukes, no. But
So
you
you
may
have
have a
to go
supplier
get 'em.
here that goes to Georgia to get them. Ask where they're coming from. And can I inspect them when I pick up? You can do that. The problem with that is if you inspect them during the day and you open that up, bees are going to fly out. You may not get them all back. Plus, the foragers are out. So unless you plan to pick them up like at sunset or late in the evening when most of them are back in there, you've got a risk of losing them. Packages, question asked, how many pounds? 2, 3, or 4 pound package. How old is the queen? Is she marked and clipped? What's the major breed line? Some of the same questions. What region do they come from? And if you ship them, do you offer a guarantee if they get here dead? Okay. Some will. Reputable package suppliers will offer you a guarantee or a refund. Nukes, Texas Bee Supply supplies nukes, and they offer you a 7-day guaranteed return policy. You go get them, you pick them up. So even if you don't inspect them, you get them home and you put them in, or when you inspect them when you put them in, you find problems with them. I had a customer who got some TBS nukes a few years ago. We pulled them out, 5 or 6 queen cells, swarm cells already on there, on one frame. But we couldn't find the queen. Pulled out another one, and we had 2 big spots on the bottom of a deep that was full of hive beetle larvae, swarming, eating up everything. So they now have a policy that we'll give you 7 days, you bring it back and we'll guarantee, no ask, we'll go out to the bee yard and let you pick out a really good one. So ask them what their guarantee return policy is.
Yeah, on Texas Bee Supply, they only started selling nukes and stuff about, what, 3
3 or 4 years ago, yeah.
And, you know, when they first started selling them, they had some problems. They had really cheap boxes they were putting them in. They weren't doing very much quality control on that.
But, yeah.
And, you know, I saw some problems. Other people had some problems. And they came and they told me about it, and I said, at that time, there was some representatives from TBS that were regularly coming and sitting up and handing out information at our meetings. I said, go tell them.
And
Go tell them. And because, you know, they got that feedback, you
They've
know,
improved that.
basically Blake clamped down on these employees and said, you're not doing this, you're not doing that, you're not doing that. They now use a pro-new plastic box. Of course, they increased their price, but they also
Quality,
have a
Increase their quality,
guarantee.
you know, not having too many failures.
So, you know, because of constructive criticism, they improve quite a
Right.
bit on what they're providing. But there's still no guarantee. I mean, you're dealing with
Yeah,
a
live
live animal, basically. You never know.
all right, if you do inspect, when you pick them up or when you get delivery, what do you look for? General condition of the frames, you know, is it loose or a good root pattern? Any queen cups or cells, any cross combing that's been going on? One of the nukes, well, customers I had that bought them from TBS the first year or two, we opened it and there was cross combing everywhere. Those frames hadn't been pulled out in 6 months. There was cross combing everywhere. How much brood and pollen is in there? Is it a good pattern? Is there evidence of small hive beetle or varroa? If there's a ton of small hive beetles, I'd be leery. You might not see varroa. They're so small, you're not going to see them on the bees very well. Usually on the underside or they're in cap cells. If you can see evidence of varroa, that's probably too much. How much activity? Are the bees active or good? If you take the lid off and you got 80,000 eyes looking up at you, that's probably a healthy hive. If you open it up and there's just a few bees wandering around, I'd be leery of that one. Can you find the queen? You don't necessarily have to, but do you see evidence that she's there? If she's marked, you should be able to see her if you pull a frame. For a package, what's the bee activity? Good or lethargic in the package? Now, if it's cold, they're probably going to be lethargic, so you might take that into consideration. Are they aggressive towards the queen? Are they balling up around that cage? Okay, might worry about that. How many attendants are in the queen if you can see them or if they have any in there? Same thing. Evidence of small hive beetle or varroa. Shouldn't have a whole lot of small hive beetles in the package because when you shake those out of the frames, the hive beetles don't normally go with the bees. Sometimes they do.
Sometimes they'll be in that cluster.
Sometimes they will. And are
At
there
least one or two adults.
are there any dead bees in the bottom of the package? Okay, a lot of dead bees might be a problem. How long has it been since they've been out away from the hive? Have they been exposed to extreme cold or heat? Okay, take a picture and document the package of the bee's condition. And as soon as you get it, so if you've got a problem and you want to complain back, you've got something to do. Not all nukes or packages make it for a variety of reasons, and they're not all due to the shipper's problem or the bee supplier's problem. They're not all your problem. Sometimes they just don't work out. Short list of package suppliers. These are in your book. They may be different or more from yours. The prices that are quoted are probably last year's, so I would be take that with a grain of salt. We do not endorse any specific supplier. Okay? Now don't go complain to your favorite bee suppliers. Well, we don't like you on the list. They don't like you. We may not know about it. But if you come to us personally, we'll tell you our own opinion. Personal opinion. Not a BFBA opinion. Personal. Nuke inspection. Here's what I'm talking about, cross-combing. I don't know if you can see that or not very well. That's a pretty good brood pattern. This hole in the center was probably the first eggs laid. When we took this out, they've already hatched, and she's gone back in there and relayed in that hole and continue to do that. That is burr comb between the two boxes. And that's not always bad. It just means they're actively building, or you may need to give them a little more room. This is cross combing. I don't know if you can see that or not, but it's built out. There's actually a layer of comb here, space behind it between that and the frame, and more comb in there. Which is where they had an empty frame out, and the bees built out on the front of one frame, behind us. Those were kind of problems.
Might not have been sitting perfectly level too, or something like that.
Yeah, you know, when I talked about bee space, when you put your frames in there, you wanna make sure that they're tight. If you leave, you know, put them in there cattywampus, or, you know, leave a lot of, some extra space in there, they will try to fill it. So you wanna make sure you butt those, comb, or those frames up against each other, so they're nice and tight, because extra space means an extra place to build.
Yeah, when you go to put them all back in there, you know, don't leave, because of different, differences in size between different manufacturers, you might have a little extra space. Don't, if you want to evenly space them, you can do that, some do. Then you try to push them all against one side, and you have a little extra space on this side, that just gives you room to move out, try to buck those all up so you have less cross on the side.
Well, the whole thing about cross combing is just it's harder to maneuver.
Yeah,
They
they're all
right.
glued together.
They
Now you
wanna-
can't break one out. That's why you
Otherwise
want.
they grow together.
And when
Yeah.
they do that cross comb, not only is it harder to separate it, but a lot of times they'll fill it with, you know, larvae or honey, and then you pop it apart and you got a mess.
Yeah,
I
then
think-
you gotta take your.
I think you were doing the same thing I did.
Oh.
You like to jump around.
There you go.
Yeah, she mentioned one of the tools, I carry a long bread knife, and I go with a serrated edge, okay? That's nice for going down in between it, and it's kind of slicing down through there, and you do get some cross comb. So it goes slow, so the bees get out of your way, you end up cutting through some brood, but, you know, you want to kill the bees.
Clean.
Try to do it clean.
Yeah, make sure you put your frames tight together, and then also, you know, I talked about leveling from side to side.
Yep.
Because that also will make them want to create some cross cutting.
Nuke installation, nuke installation is easier than package installation in my mind. Prepare the hive, you've got an 8 or 10 frame, you've only got 4 or 5 frames coming out of the nuke, so you've got some empty space. So you put your frames out of your nuke in there. If you want to use a frame feeder, put that in there. Sometimes you get that with your nuke. If not, put in extra frames. Put all those frames to one side in the same order they came out of the nuke. Okay? Feed them and close it up. Leave them for a week. Even though you're a new beekeeper, the temptation is to go out there every hour and open them up and see how much wax they built out. Don't do that. Leave them for at least a week. If you can't wait 3 or 4 days, okay, go look at them in 3 or 4 days. But we recommend a week. Okay. Then, when you come back, they should have started to build out on at least that next frame, if not 2 frames over. As soon as they start to do that, you know they've been accepted and they're good to go. My personal technique is, once they've done that, I'll take an empty frame, and I'll move one of those 2 frames they've built out, and I'll move them over, and I'll put a brand new empty frame inside with those they've already built out. Why? That violates bee space. They've got extra space in here. They look in there and go, I had comb out there. Where did it go? Well, they get busy and they will build that comb out on that frame faster. And it just helps you out. It's called checkerboarding. That's what I'm talking about. When it's obvious the hive has been accepted, you put an empty frame in there. Next time you go out, you can move another frame over and do another one in there. Put another empty frame in there. Feed. They need sugar water. If not, they're going to have to use nectar that they've collected, and that's going to take away from the honey. We talked about the ratio. There's 2 ways to get in a fight with a beekeeper. One is arguing over which way the inner cover goes, if the shadow side up or down. The other way is what mix to feed during the time of year. Basically, it doesn't matter either one. As she already talked about. Feeders, we've gone through, we've showed the different types. The only recommendation for the Ziploc plastic bag, don't cut the slit till you put it inside.
No.
Check the water, she talked about that. Pollen patties, we talked about that. I love those feeders. I've got 3 hanging around in my apiary, and I bought more to put out there now. Now, any questions? Yes, sir.
Can you just touch on real quick overfeeding?
Overfeeding, yes, I can. I can. overfeeding. If they're a good, active hive, they'll use that sugar water. They'll turn it into honey. And what they'll end up doing is, she's not laying, so there's a lot of empty cells that don't get filled up with brood. So they've got sugar water there. They'll take that sugar water, they'll turn it into honey, and they'll pack it in those cells. Now it comes out of winter, and they've still got all that honey still there. They haven't eaten through it all, and she's got no place to lay. They filled up all the holes. So now then she can't lay. None of bees start dying. Bees die to the point they can't eat enough of the honey to empty up holes. She's got no place to lay. You're honey bound, all right, and hives gonna die. Full of food, but you got no bees to repopulate the ones that are dying off. In short version, that's what happens. That's the worst case scenario. So feed them, but don't overfeed them. Always make sure she's got, even in winter, she's got some room to lay if she decided she wanted to. Questions?
Wouldn't that be the time to cultivate the honey?
No, not in the wintertime, because you also don't want to cultivate that honey that's been put into brood frames. May have a bad taste to it. If it's put into brood frames where the bees live when they were born, that's usually not good.
And if you're feeding sugar water, it's sugar water.
And if you're feeding sugar water, it's sugar syrup. It's real light and weird. It tastes like lemongrass. I mean, a whole bunch of things. You don't want to harvest, if you can avoid it, harvest honey out of bee frames. Now, the first year beekeeper, I've got clients that are first year beekeepers that they're not, you don't get your bees till late, so you're late already, and you may miss some of the flow. Sometimes I'll tell them, let's take one of those earlier frames that the bees did put real honey in, even though you're in your brood chamber, we'll go harvest one of those just so you get some honey this year, so you're not feel like you're feeding. Any other questions? If not, we will, I guess, continue. If you need to take a break, please do.